This is Judy Eliza M. Hapitan, and I will be reporting for our subject Science, Technology, and Society. Human flourishing as reflected in progress and development. Forget developing poor countries, it's time to de-develop rich countries. Before we discuss Jason Hickel's concept, let us first go to human flourishing. So what is human flourishing? According to what I have researched in Google, human flourishing is both the optimal continuing development of human beings' potential and living well as human beings, which means that we are being engaged in relationship and activities that are meaningful to us. I have here the characteristics of human flourishing. Number one is all humans aim to flourish. Number two, human flourishing involves putting into action one's capacities, capabilities, and virtues. Number three is human flourishing depends on free will. Number four, human flourishing is sustained over time. Number five, human flourishing involves doing well in broad domains of human life. Humans have attained certain progresses that we lacked before. Mortality rates are lower due to less death due to diseases and childbirth. Lifespans have increased because of better medical care and health conditions. Literacy rates also increase through better access to education and to more alternatives or modes of learning. Also, productivity increased, though differing in levels in many countries, which increased food supply and income of families. However, determining the ways on how to attain a flourishing human life is not an easy endeavor, especially in the context of science and technology. Though, as from our previous lessons, we have learned that science and technology are instrumental in human flourishing. Some may say that overdependence to the point in defying science may pose a threat to human flourishing. We will go to John Hickel's concept, which is to forget developing poor countries, it's time to de-develop rich countries. Jason Hickel is an anthropologist at the London School of Economics, the University of Virginia, and Goldsmiths, University of London, where he convenes the MA in Anthropology and Cultural Politics. He challenges us to rethink and reflect on a different paradigm of the development. Jason Hickel said that it's time to forget developing poor countries, it's time to de-develop rich countries. First, how can we know if we are progressing, and what are the indicators that we are developing? So we can see all around us that many infrastructures are built and more technology exists. This the indicators that humans are also progressing because progressing is start to ourselves before it reflects to our society. And more often than not, development is equated with growth and greater consumption. The more that the population is able to consume, the wealthier it is. Now, let's move on to Jason Hickel's concept. This week, heads of states are gathering in New York to sign the UN's new Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The main objective is eradicate poverty by 2030. Let us quote the main objective, which is to eradicate poverty by 2030. Beyonce, One Direction, and Malala are on board. It's set to be a monumental internal celebration. Given all the fanfare, one might think that SDGs are about to offer a fresh plan of how to save the world, but beneath all the hype, it's business as usual. The main strategy for eradicating poverty is the same, which is growth. Growth has been the main object of development for the past 70 years, despite the fact that it's not working. Since 1980, the global economy has grown by 380%, but the number of people living in poverty on less than $5 a day has increased by 1.1 billion. That's 17 times the population of Britain. So we understand that the growth is the only way where we can eradicate the poverty. But it is not working. As you can hear in what I said, many people have been affected by poverty. To continue, orthodox economists insist that all only need is yet more growth. More progressive types tells us that we need to shift some yields of growth from the richer segments of the population to the poorer ones, evening things out a bit. Neither approach is adequate. Why? Because even at current levels of average global consumption, we're overshooting our planet's biocapacity by more than 50% each year. In other words, growth isn't an option anymore. We've already grown too much. Scientists are now telling us that we're blowing past planetary boundaries at breakneck speed. And the hard truth is that this global crisis is due almost entirely to overconsumption in rich countries. So the reason for the poverty all across the poor countries is because of the overconsumption of the rich countries. Now, Jason Hickel tells us that instead of pushing poor countries to catch up with rich ones, we should be getting rich countries to catch down. Right now, our planet only has enough resources for each of us to consume 1.8 global hectares annually. It is a standardized unit that measures resource use and waste. This figure is roughly what the average person in Ghana or Guatemala consumes. By contrast, people in the US and Canada consume about 8 hectares per person, while Europeans consume 4.7 hectares. What does this mean for our theory of development? According to economist Peter Egward, he argued that instead of pushing poorer countries to catch up with rich ones, we should be thinking of ways to get rich countries to catch down to more appropriate levels of development. We should look at societies where people live long and happy lives at relatively low levels of income and consumption, not as basket cases that need to be developed towards Western models, but as exemplars of efficient living. How do we really need to live long, happy lives? In the US, life expectancy is 79 years and GDP per capita is $53,000. But many countries have achieved similar life expectancy with mere fraction of this income. Cuba has comparable life expectancy to the US and one of the highest literacy rates in the world with GDP per capita of only $6,000 and consumption of only 1.9 hectares. In light of this, we should perhaps regard such countries not as underdeveloped but rather as appropriately developed. Maybe we need to start calling on rich countries to justify their excesses. 70% of people in middle and high income countries believe overconsumption is putting our planet and society at risk. Either we slow down voluntarily or climate change will do it for us. We can't go on ignoring the laws of nature, but rethinking our theory of progress is not only an ecological imperative, it is also a development one. If we do not act soon, all our hard won against poverty will evaporate as food systems collapse and mass famine reemerges to an extent not since the 19th century. This is not about giving anything up, and it's certainly not about living a life voluntary misery or imposing harsh limits on human potential. On the contrary, it's about reaching a higher level of understanding and consciousness about what we're doing here and why. This is Jason Hickel's concept. To further explain the concept of Jason Hickel, he claimed more growth or shifting growth from developed to developing nations or inadequate strategies to finally end the problem of poverty. He asserted we have continually going past our capacity to generate supply of renewable resource and to absorb surplus. Developed countries are also overconsuming. That is the main problem. Hickel said that instead of poor countries catching up to grow as much as rich countries could consider reaching more appropriate levels of development. Living long and happy lives despite low incomes could be target or goal instead of increasing growth. This means that though countries might have high incomes, this does not equate to a long lives, literate citizens, and generally happy lives. He asserted that countries may consider de-development a shift of focus from economic growth to life expectancy and happiness. The idea is for people to aim for a better value of life instead of acquiring and producing more quality over quantity. Though many believe that material gain is not overly necessary to achieve overall happiness, and many question that the current way of thinking about progress, it is difficult to sell the concept of the development because of the connotations of the language used by those people who promote it. Terms such as degrowth, zero becoming appropriately developed. According to Hickel, the solutions to achieve this goal include banning advertising, a shorter working week, and basic income. Hickel warned us that if we insist of too much growth, the environment will stop us from growing, and that we will end up on poverty, something that we aim to escape from. Now we will answer some questions in regards with John Hickel's concept of the development. Number one question is, what is the framework of the development of rich countries all about? So the framework of the development of countries is that they are consuming too much resources that may lead to the planet and society at risk because we are growing too many and the planet cannot cater the population anymore. And according to Hickel, economic growth is not a solution anymore. Number two, how is the development framework different from traditional frameworks of development? Well, the difference between the two frameworks is that the development framework is seeing people live a long, healthy, contented, and happy life, no matter what class you belong to. Number three, according to Hickel, how can rich countries develop? So, as what we read a while ago, according to Hickel, rich countries can develop by reducing their consumption of resources and think of ways to get rich countries to catch down to the level of development by living efficiently and happily. Number four question is, why does Hickel frown upon pundits using terms such as degrowth and zero growth or de-development in describing the alternative framework? Hickel frowned because pundits use these terms which it gives a negative impact on the progress of the country itself or the concept of the development. Hickel said that these terms are technically accurate, but for some people, they may be displeased by it. Number 5. Some people might think that the development is about giving things up. How does Hickel explain that this is not the case? So Hickel explained this by cheering up ourselves that this is not about giving things up, but rather this helps us to improve our life to be better and to reach a high level of understanding and consciousness. We must consider and adapt the ways of how people live, especially the people of poor countries, for us to have a healthy planet and for us to live a long and happy life.